This is probably the first and last time I'll be talking about my faith because I'm not a pastor or something. Hi guys, Annette here and welcome to another episode of Growing Up. So today I'm going to be doing a video that's kind of different from my usual videos because I'm going to be talking about my faith and I don't usually talk about this, so I hope you will be respectful in the comments, and if this isn't something you want to listen to, you can feel free to click away, it's alright. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because I do feel that a big part of who I am is what I believe in, and I just want to just share a little bit about why I still believe in God and why I'm still Christian after so many years, and how I overcame almost just deciding that I don't believe in God anymore. I'm gonna start out with how I first started going to church. It's a very simple answer, honestly. I was there since young, since Sunday school, since I was a baby. I was just put there by my parents. But without going into detail about my family, as much as my family isn't perfect, one thing I am grateful for is that my parents did just put us in church on Sundays. But when you're a super small kid, you don't really know much, and I think as you get older, that's when I started to have a lot more questions. So I would say that I first started having doubts around late teens-ish. That's when a lot of my friends also left, and I think there were a few reasons. The first one is probably just like a quest for freedom. I think I was in a church where you had to do a lot of good things and you had to serve, and I didn't like that I had to follow all these rules, because to me was I just following them because I was being an obedient kid? What if I've just been doing all this and believing this because I was told to do it, it's not because I'm like thinking for myself. And I started to wonder like, am I thinking for myself? Like, what is freedom? And I think the next thing was also just getting hurt by people in church. I think many people have had this experience, and it's very sad. I do not wish anyone to be hurt in church. And I have one pretty strong memory of a bully that I had at my very first church youth camp. So basically, you first graduate, right, from primary school into secondary school, and that's when you join the youth group. And I remember I went to my very first camp, and you're like just this little 12, 13-year-old, and you don't know what's going on, and they split you into camp groups, and then you play games and stuff. And I was in this one group where this girl was just really mean to me for no reason. Okay, so she was a year older than me, and I remember in that group I had only one other person who was my age, who was like a new freshman-ish, and she was really soft-spoken. She would just keep pulling that girl away from me and not let me talk to that girl. And simple things like, if I wanted to go to the bathroom, I would ask my that friend to go to the bathroom with me. She would pull that girl away and say, let's go somewhere else, and then I had to go to the bathroom alone. And I remember on the bus back home from the camp, we were all about to go and sit on the bus. So I was going to head there and sit at the back of the bus, and she said, "You cannot sit here." And I was all, okay. And I was really sad about it. I cried. And then after that church camp, I went to a care group. I had one of my care group sort of leaders. She had a few of the 12-year-olds that she liked, and she would show favoritism and she would hang out with them more. So that also made me feel a little bit more rejected also, and also hurt. And so that to me was, this just tainted my experience of what it's going to be like growing up as a young person in church. And when you're a youth, right, you're 12, 13 years old, you already feel so insecure, and you feel you're starting to feel aware of your situation, and like, people are judging me, and then now suddenly this person just didn't like you for no reason, or I don't know why. I think I was very nerdy probably. I was very uncool. And so because I was very uncool, I was a target. Because you start to think, like, if these people truly are supposed to believe in God, right, then why are they so mean to you? Lastly, and I think one more thing that made me doubt was kind of just having a lot of questions that I felt couldn't be answered. I started to think, maybe what if God isn't real? You can't even see God, right? So what if there's just not enough evidence? I don't know how many of you guys who grew up in church like me as a kid have had this sort of phase, but I would like to think it's more common than you think yourself. Like, I think it can feel like a very lonely experience when you're questioning all this kind of stuff, right? No one really just discusses this, and they don't talk about it because I think they feel bad, like you're gonna judge them for leaving, and they feel the people in church are going to judge them for leaving. But I'm generally a pretty introverted, introspective kind of person, and so I'm pretty thankful for that, because I decided in the end, okay, you know what, I'm gonna spend even more time right now just reflecting more, reading more, researching more, and just come to my own conclusion. Because I felt like if there is a God, then I can't possibly be smarter than him, right? So I can't possibly know better based on whatever I'm feeling at this point of time. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to straight up quit, because I didn't want to leave the faith because I felt like there was not a good reason to believe. I wanted to leave because there was a reason to leave. Does it make sense? So anyways, then I went on this mental pilgrimage, and over time, right, God really revealed so much to me. And as time progressed on and on, right, all the more I started to see the joy and the peace and the certainty that came with keeping my faith. So I'm going to move on to why I stayed. So first, I discovered that doubt is actually a very necessary pit stop to faith. And many people don't realize that. I think they judge people for even asking questions. But heck no, ask all the questions you want. Nobody wants you to also believe just because you're lazy and because you're not actually thinking, right? Asking questions is the foundation of any relationship out there. You cannot have a strong relationship with anyone if you're not constantly asking questions. Whether it's meeting a friend for the first time, going on a date, right? You're constantly asking, so how old are you? What do you do for work? Asking questions is how love even develops, right? And I discovered that was the same thing when it came to God, which was that God created us to have a relationship with us. And so this whole time as a kid, I was just following instructions, obeying whatever was told to me. But the truth is that in order to really have a relationship with Jesus, right, it's all about asking questions. And so I don't think anyone should ever be shamed for asking questions. And in fact, I think it's something that should be so encouraged. Which leads me to my next thing, which I discovered, which is Christianity honestly isn't all about rules. It's really just about relationship. And there are some Christians who made it about the rules, and if anything, Jesus came to show that these rules just don't work. It's nobody can follow it perfectly. Like, not a single person followed the 10 commandments perfectly, and everybody fell short, and that's why we all need Jesus, right? And so let's say one of the 10 commandments was don't commit adultery. But you cannot commit adultery and still not love your wife, right? And that's kind of the difference, between a bunch of rules and having a relationship, and someone teaching you stuff as part of a relationship. And I also came to realize that a lot of all these very religious people who are very self-righteous, who are always scolding you and judging you in church, certainly don't represent God. And that also includes the people who hurt other people in church. We should never conflate these people and their imperfections and their shortcomings with God, who's perfect himself. Which leads me to my next point, which is about hurt and imperfection in church. I think I look back on a lot of the times where I was hurt in church, and I started to realize that as I got older, I actually experienced this in many aspects of my life. People were not nice in the workplace, people were not nice in school, and it just dawned on me that it wasn't a problem with God, it was just a problem with any human organization. Like, when there's hurt and when there's imperfection, it just happens because people are people, right? And even I personally, as I'm telling you about how I've gotten hurt and how people around me are imperfect, I'm flawed as well, and I'm completely imperfect. Somebody tries to portray to you that they are the most perfect person in this world, chances are they are not, okay? Because you can tell someone how great you are, but only you know your own heart about the negative feelings you feel sometimes when you get really angry. And I think it's so harmful and just such a weird expectation sometimes, where people just expect that Christians should be perfect and that once you're a Christian, you should be a perfect person, which is so not true, Like, every Christian is human just like every other non-Christian. And me being a Christian is just struggling every single day to try my best. But if I can't, I have the grace of God to carry me. It's like even Gandhi said, I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians. Fair enough. Understandable. So I thought about it and I realized that that's why Jesus even came, because he knew that nobody could be perfect. And so he came to die for everybody's sins, right? And stand in our place as a perfect person before God. And so if everybody in this world is imperfect, everybody in this world is full of sin, then I figured I'd rather have God to comfort me when I'm hurt. I'd rather have God be my strength when I'm weak. And I'd rather have God forgive my sins when I'm not living up to a 100% perfect moral standard. We're all broken and we're all searching for that same healing and that same hope. And it can only be found in God, because you can't find your healing and your hope in any other human being who's going to disappoint you, right? Which leads me to my next point, which is understanding forgiveness. In my search for trying to understand forgiveness, it's such a weird concept, forgiveness. Forgiveness basically is a math equation that has gone wrong, okay? Because if somebody gives you 2 bad apples, in order to equalize it, you have to return them 2 bad apples and then everything is back to normal, right? Eye for an eye. But forgiveness is basically someone giving you 2 bad apples and then you give them 2 good apples. Why? Why would you do that? And I have never been able to find a better explanation for forgiveness than in the explanation of Christ. So I think this is probably my top reason for what has kept my faith going. Once again, I grew up in church, and for the longest time it felt like I had to forgive people just because the Bible said so. Or later on, the slightly better explanation is Jesus forgives you and so you have to forgive others. But it's still really hard to come to terms with the fact, right, that I feel generally I'm not as bad as the people who bullied me. I'm still not as bad as the people who have wronged me or crossed me. How do I bring myself to forgive this other person? So I struggled with that for a while until there was a period where it hit me. The reason why we struggle with forgiveness is because we think that we're inherently good. And there's a lot of pride in that. Like, I feel that 80% of me actually didn't need salvation from Jesus. I didn't need to be saved. 80% of me is good, right? But honestly, at the end of the day, sin is sin, and actually I am no different from everyone else who is bad. Because if you think about it, how do you truly quantify, how do you truly measure who is a better person, who is a worse person in this world? I'll give you a scenario. For instance, I lived my whole life doing nothing really productive. I've never killed anyone. I've never saved anyone. Am I a better person than let's say this guy who is a lifeguard and he saved 100 drowning people in his life, but he's also a murderer on the side and he's killed about 50 people? Is he a better person than me who has done nothing in my life? Because actually, you think about it, right? Net, he's saved 50 people in his life. But no, you just think about the fact that he's killed that 50 people. And so it's so hard, and we are not God, and we are not the arbiter of who is a good person, who is a bad person, because you just don't know anybody. Nobody knows anybody completely. Only God knows you completely, and you know yourself completely. You know your own heart, and God knows your heart. And I think it's truly when I started to grasp that concept that I am no better than the worst murderer in this world. I'm no better than my bullies. I'm no better than anybody whom I think is a worse person than me. And that I need the same amount of salvation as every single person. And that's when I really learned to forgive. Like, I was able to just truly let go, and it was such a liberating feeling. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's basically me realizing God is able to forgive this person, and God is the one who's an arbiter of right and wrong, and He can forgive this person. Why can't I forgive this person? And I honestly believe that God doesn't look at us as good people, bad people, and all He cares about is you being able to live the best life that you can live. And how do you live the best life you can live, right? It's a life that's full of love, and God so loved the world, and that's why He gave His Son to come die for us and give us eternal life. And so lastly, one of my 12 a.m., 2 a.m. musings that have kept me up in the middle of the night is this thought where I always feel humans are kind of strange. We're often like two things at once. We want to be accepted and belong to somewhere, and that's where we find our value. But at the same time, sometimes we just want to be different. We want to stand out, and in standing out, we also can find that value in being unique and special. So which do we want to be? How do we be both at the same time? And I love how God somehow answers that in being able to satisfy both by allowing you to be accepted by Him through the grace of Jesus, but at the same time allowing you to be set apart, and gives you that identity where you are secure either way. And I feel that, and it's such a secure feeling. I don't know how to explain it, but it's also very, very peaceful. And I love that I can find my value in that, and I can find my value in being loved either way. And I think maybe as a creative person, sometimes like growing up, I felt very different. And I felt like I wanted to be accepted, but at the same time I also wanted to be special, because when you're an artist, right, you want to have a voice that is different from everyone else also. And in that weird space where I was finding myself and trying to discover my identity, I found it in Jesus. And I think I just want to end off with this one last thing, which is how, I just don't have all the answers. As much as I'm doing this video and telling you about answers that I've discovered, I think there are a million answers out there which I still haven't discovered, and every single day is a new discovery for me. And there were miracles in my life that have happened. There are things that have happened that just do not make sense. I'll give you an example. Someone came up to me during a time in church. I was in church, and someone came up to me during a time where I was contemplating leaving my job, and this person just came up to me and said, I just wanted to say that the Lord has your career in His hands and you don't need to worry. And it's like, I don't know you, stranger, okay? And I would go on, but there's so many things like this, crazy instances that have happened to me, and moments where it just doesn't make sense. It just didn't make sense logically. And so, like I said, I don't have all the answers, but sometimes you don't really need to have all the answers as well, because sometimes all you need are just experiences in which your life has changed. And for me, my life has changed. There's this story in the Bible. This blind man was healed, and he went to tell the Pharisees about it, and because they're all like by the book rule kind of people, and this had never happened before, and they kept asking, how did this happen? And he said, Jesus healed me. I'm not telling this story perfectly, I'm trying to keep it short, but long story short, he just says, I don't know, okay? I don't know how, I don't know what. All I know is I once was blind and now I see. And I think that pretty much sums up my journey, where as much as I'm trying to, funnily enough, give you some sort of answers, I just want to say that I can't give you perfect answers, but I'm okay with that, because I feel that more importantly, I once was blind and now I see. I think that's more important sometimes than trying to line up a bunch of facts and logic. So I just wanted to close and talk about why I wanted to make this video. So I would say it's because, I grew up seeing a lot of videos where people share their stories of how they grew up being Christian and why they left the church. A lot of them started off very similar to me, which is that they were kind of placed there, forced there in Sunday school by their parents as a kid. And I realized that people usually share the stories when they leave, but they don't really share the story when they stay. I mean, it's kind of how I made a video of why I left my job. But if I stayed at my job, I probably wouldn't share about it. And so I just felt that, that was a side of the story that isn't really told a lot online, and I wanted to share my story of why I stayed. And it doesn't mean that just because this side of the story isn't told, it doesn't happen, right? So a lot of the videos that I've seen are like that. Either that, or it's like a testimony video where somebody has some crazy conversion story where they discovered Jesus, which I didn't have that also, because I grew up in church, and I just thought this was a story that maybe many of you guys can relate to, especially if you grew up in church and you're struggling with the same stuff, or you did struggle with the same stuff growing up. Whether it's because you're tired by rules and demands being placed on you, whether you are hurt by the church, or whether you are just wondering whether you're truly believing this, or you're just believing in it because you grew up being told to believe in it. I just want to encourage you to just take some time to spend some time with your own thoughts and just ask yourself, like, is there something you would believe in even if you were the only person on earth? If you shut off every other opinion, everything else you've read online, everything else you've seen, and just studied and tried to discover things on your own, and if people around you weren't thinking a certain way and people around you weren't treating you a certain way, you and God, will you still believe in Him? And one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Jesus came back after His death, and then He cooked. He cooked for the disciples, made fish. And Jesus kind of told Peter that he was going to be a martyr, like he was going to have to die for his faith. And Peter said, "What about him?" referring to John. And Jesus said, "What is that to you? You follow me." And I realized sometimes, we spend so much of our time just being concerned with the people whom we like or don't like in church, whether they've hurt us or they've not hurt us, whether we're jealous of them, and we compare whether their walk with God is better than ours or worse than ours. But honestly, I think we should just all stop looking at the people around us, and instead of asking, what about this person, what about that person, why does this person say they're Christian but doesn't show it? Jesus says, what is it to you? You follow me. And I found so much peace in that. And so we've come to the end of the video. It is super dark right now because of the rain, and I think it's way darker from when I first started this video. This is really something super different from what I usually share. This is probably the first and last time I'll be talking about my faith, because I'm not a pastor or something. And yeah, if you like this video, do hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in another episode soon of Glowing Up. Bye!